Hey, what's going on, everybody? Back with another how-to. Today we're going to be doing the valve cover gasket on this 2011 Kia Forte EX. Now this should fall in line with any first gen 2.0 Kia Forte, and that's 2010 to 2013, so let's get into it now. Alright, so we have the hood popped here. First thing we're going to do, because we are going to be disconnecting electrical components, the ignition coils, we're going to take off our negative battery terminal. So it's a 10 millimeter. Loosen this terminal up. And we're just going to put that right to the side for right now. Alright, next up here is we got to remove our plastic cover. That's just to get to the valve cover and all the components we need to get to remove this. So this should just pop right up. Just took my hand, popped it right off. And it's really just being held in right here and right here by these rubber mounts right here on the cover. So just pull it straight up and the cover will come right off. All right, now that we have our cover off, you can see she's leaking pretty bad, especially right here in that back corner. She is spewing. Got it all the way around. It's leaking pretty bad on the inner part of the cover, as you can see. So pretty much leaking all the way around the entire valve cover. So let's go ahead and get this thing off. All right, so now that we have the plastic cover off, we have complete access to everything we need to remove on the valve cover. So we're going to go ahead and start with removing our ignition coils and the harnesses. So these harnesses have a gray tab that you can pull back. All right, so it pulls right back, and then from there you can press down on it, and that will release the harness. And then we have a 10 mil holding in the coil itself. So we're gonna go ahead and take a socket, 10 mil deep with an extension. Pretty easy to break loose. And then you can go ahead and fire this out with a drill, back it out with your hand. Really doesn't matter, do whatever works for you, but go ahead and get this thing out. There is our 10 mil. Just going to put it right to the side in a magnetic tray so we don't lose everything and we keep everything in order. And then from there we should be able to pull our ignition coil right out. And there you go. You can see some of that leakage right there from where that spark plug seal on the valve cover is leaking through. So I'm just going to gently put this right up on the window, and I'm just going to put each one in order as I take them out. And we'll go ahead and get these other 3 coils out now, guys. All right, guys, on to the next coil. Pull that gray tab back, pull our harness off. Then we have the 10 mil holding in the coil. Go ahead and break that loose, back it out, put this thing to the side. Let's pull our coil out. There we go, guys, and that's all we have to do for the remaining coils. All right, now that we have all 4 of our ignition coils out, we're going to go ahead and remove this plastic harness right here. This is what's holding all of our coil harnesses in. It has 2 10 mils holding it in, so pretty much same deal just as the ignition coils. We're just going to break both of these loose. Actually, these things are like finger tight, so these are barely even in here. All right, so there is one. Let's get this other one out. There is 2. All right, so now this harness is free and we should be able to lift it and just put this right over here to the side out of our workway for now, and we'll get that back installed once we get the valve cover back together. All right, so we got the plastic harness rail out of our workway. Now, just for reference, this metal bracket here held in with these 2 10 mils, this can remain on the valve cover. These do not have to be removed in order to get the valve cover off. So our next move here is just going to be removing our PCV and our breather hoses. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start with this one. I'm actually going to move this clamp into a better orientation. There you go. Got that moved up a hair so I can get these long needle noses on it. And there we go. Get that right off. And it might be a little bit tight. You might have to take your pliers, needle noses, or whatever and start rocking the rubber hose like that. See, we got it moving. And now hose slides right off. All right, so we're just going to do the same thing for this one over here. I'm going to go ahead, take our needle noses, pull that clamp back. Let's go ahead and get this thing freed up. Yep, you can almost hear when that rubber frees up, and you'll be able to remove it. All right, there we go. Pulled it right off, and now both of our hoses are off of the valve cover, and all we have now really is the bolts holding the cover on and these two zip tie clamps holding this wire on going across the edge of the cover. So these do tend to break a lot because they're old and they are heat damaged from being hot and cold and hot and cold. So if you break this, don't be overly upset, but I like to try to keep stuff intact. So yeah, she actually broke a little bit, but she stayed together okay, I guess. You can always take a zip tie and re-zip tie these if you do happen to break these, but these aren't made well to begin with. On top of that, they're old and been through multiple heat cycles, so they're not going to be in the best condition. But let's go ahead and get this one out as well. All right, so we got this one out as well, and now we can just take this harness wire here and just push it under this power steering line right here. And there we go, we got it under and out of our workway. So only thing left, guys, is these 10 mils holding in the valve cover. So let's go ahead and start cracking all these loose, and we're going to get them all out. All right, so what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to break all these loose with the ratchet with my 10 mil here. All right, and after I do that, I'm going to go ahead and just take a drill real quick and fire them all out. And then we'll get all these bolts in a magnetic tray. But there's 4 on the inside here, so breaking those loose, and then we have 14 other bolts going around the outer edge. So start right here, and we're just going to break all of them loose. And you probably could break these loose with a very small impact or a drill, but I'm just doing it with a ratchet just to be on the safe side. So let's go ahead, get all these broken loose, and then we'll get them all out. All right, so I have all of these broken loose. So now I'm just gonna take a drill. I'm just gonna back these things right out. All right, and I'm just gonna throw them in a magnetic tray just to keep them safe out of the way and we won't lose them. But I don't know if you can see, these things are extremely oily. This thing is spewing, look at that. Alright guys, and all these bolts are the same, so you don't have to really worry about keeping them in a specific order or anything like that. The center ones and these outer edge ones are all the same style, 10 millimeter. Alright, so we have everything removed on and around this valve cover, so it is ready to come off. So what we're going to do is just give this a little pry. It should free up the cover from the head itself, and then that way we can just give it a little pull and it should come right out. So let's go ahead and separate this thing from the head, guys. All right, so now that we have everything loose, the cover is essentially free. We do need to break it free from the cylinder head. Now this is going to be pretty tight. It's probably going to be on there. It's going to require a little bit of persuasion to come off. Now sometimes you could take a big flat head, start in a corner and get this thing to start coming up, but we need to be extremely careful with this valve cover because it is plastic, and you could also scratch or damage the head surface with a flat head or something metal and comparable. I'm going to try to use this gasket scraper right here in this bottom left corner. Let me see if I can get it under here and get it started, and we should be able to slide it under enough that it'll start breaking it free of hair. You need to be extremely careful. You can hear it moving. There we go. She's coming free. Yep, there it is, guys. Just barely went under this bottom left corner with it. Start pulling her up all the way around. Pretty tight back here still, which is funny because that's where it's leaking. I think it'll be freer. There we go. There we go. There we go, guys. Just this little gasket scraper. Slid it right under the corner. I think it's a little bit safer than the flathead. We should be able to maneuver this thing on out. You might have to move the power steering hose around a bit. But there we go, guys. Valve cover is fully removed. All right, real quick, just to give you some insight onto this gasket's condition, you can see that it was completely ripped right here on the spark plug seal, so this thing was not in the best condition. Looks breaking right off. So definitely was time. All right, now one of the hugest factors in doing a successful valve cover gasket install is the prep and the cleaning of the surfaces before you actually put the new gasket on. So I started off by using that gasket scraper, getting some of that black tar off of it very carefully and evenly as possible. So I'm also using some brake cleaner, some paper towels, and I have some brake cleaner on this red 3M Scotch-Brite. And I'm gonna go around the edges here, and we're gonna get all this excess debris and oil and gasket and all of the above off with this 3M Scotch-Brite. You also want to get in on these spark plug wells where the spark plug seals mate to the well right there. So you can see how I got that cleaned off. You just want to go around it very lightly, keep it wet with brake cleaner, and you should be able to get most of the grime and dirt and all the remnants of the old gasket off while doing this. All right, we got this all cleaned up, about as best as it's going to get. You might still see a bit of oxidation around some of these bolt holes and stuff, but as long as it's smooth and you got all the oil and everything cleaned up, you should be just fine. But one thing to keep in mind too is make sure you get all your edges clean. You know, anywhere you saw oil, try to wipe it down. So not only to help give you the best chance at a good install, but also to ensure that your repair is actually working and that you actually solved the oil leak. So we got everything cleaned up so we can tell. And we also have the valve cover all cleaned up. So front and back, this thing is not 100%, but pretty clean, you know, considering how bad and oiled and grimed up it was. And we did brake clean all of our 18 valve cover bolts. So everything is cleaned up, ready for install. So let's get into the installation. All right, so here is our valve cover cleaned up. We're ready to go ahead and install the new valve cover gasket. Now I got a maul. The part number is VS50555. Now I originally bought the Felpro, and the Felpro part number is VS50697R. Now I had an issue with that gasket. I actually had to swap it out for this one. Now the outer gasket of it was fine. It fit perfect, but these inner ones here, they didn't fit into these holes like this. You see how these circles here are supposed to fit in there? If you look at this picture here, the circles that go in between each spark plug tube was way smaller. And this one right here is supposed to fit in right here. It didn't fit in this at all. It was just way too small, and this whole spark plug seal was completely wrong. So on that Felpro gasket, the outer gasket is right, but the spark plug seals are wrong, and they do not seat in these screw holes. And considering the OEM gasket is set up like this and they go in these holes, I didn't want to chance it, so I went and swapped it for this, which is correct. And if you look, it actually goes in these holes like it's supposed to. So this is the gasket I would suggest getting. It looks right, so let's go ahead and get it installed. All right, so we have the new gasket in, prepped, everything's ready for install. So one thing we need to do before we actually lay the valve cover down is we need to put a little bit of RTV right here where the timing cover meets the head on the front and the back. You'll see a little line, so we're just gonna put a little dab of the right stuff, which is pretty good RTV, Permatex. You can get at any local parts store really. It's pretty good stuff. So I'm just gonna put a dab here, a dab there, and then we're gonna go ahead and lay the gasket down. All right, guys, so we're gonna put a little dab right here. Nothing too crazy, just wanna get a nice little bead. And I'm gonna do the same thing for the back. Exact same amount, just a nice little bead. Nothing too crazy, all right? All right, time to get the valve cover gasket on, guys. So we need to be very careful and guide this in. And we need to be careful of our RTV that we don't smash it, and then we can get everything guided over everything and around these little things like that there while we're trying to get this down and aligned. I got it pretty much aligned already, so I'm gonna go ahead and drop it into place. There we go. Actually, went on very smooth. Now, We got all 18 of our valve cover bolts. Now keep in mind, these need to be cleaned, so make sure you got all of them clean. They are all the same. So I'm just going to put all these in by hand, get them finger tight as fast as I can, because we are kind of working against the clock here, because our right stuff will dry and it gets, you know, hard reasonably quick. So I'm just going to go ahead and get all these in finger tight, and then we're going to go through the torquing sequence to get this valve cover torqued to spec. Alright guys, so here is the torque sequence. Now the first torque sequence for the first step is 2.89 foot-pounds to 4.34 foot-pounds. Alright, so I'm going to convert that into inch-pounds. I'm going to go right in the middle at 3.5 foot-pounds. And if we convert that into inch-pounds, it's 42 inch-pounds. So I have my inch-pound torque wrench locked in. So we're going to start right here in the middle at number 1, which is this top dead center one basically. So we're just going to get this torqued to 42 inch-pounds. It's not going to be too tight at all. Should be actually pretty reasonably light on the torque on this one. And I do have all these finger tight. All right, so that one's locked in. So now we're going to go to 2, which is the one directly underneath of it. So that's this front one right here. Probably could have did a little better job finger tightening this one in, but get it to this 42 inch-pounds. All right, got that one locked in. So now we're going to go right next to that for number 3. All right, that's locked in. So we're just going to continue out the sequence, going to 4 right here back in the center. And then we're just going to go ahead and go through all 18 of these bolts, and then we'll get them all torqued to 42 inch-pounds in our first step. All right, so we went through our complete first sequence. We torqued everything to 3.5 foot-pounds or 42 inch-pounds, which is what I did. So first torque sequence is completed. Now let's go ahead and go through the second. So now if you look here on this diagram, it's going to be 5.78 foot-pounds to 7.23 foot-pounds. So I'm going to go right in the center again at 6.5 foot-pounds. We're going to convert it to inch-pounds again, which is 78 inch-pounds. So we're going to go through this exact same torque sequence all again with just 78 inch-pounds on our torque wrench. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to go right back to the middle, start this off. That locked in at 78, and then we're just going to go through and get each one. It's really not going to be much more of a turn than it already was. It's just going to be a nice little locking last torque. All right, so we got everything torqued to spec all through our second sequence. So everything is torqued to 78 inch-pounds. All right, so now we can just do the last few things to get this buttoned up, and we'll be all done. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with these hoses. Get our PCV hose right here. Back slid on to the PCV valve. This breather hose here back on over here. So I'm just going to take some needle noses and get these right back into their original orientation, and then from there we're just going to keep on with the reinstallation. All right, so we have our PCV hose and our breather hose back in their original orientation. Now I'm going to go ahead and get all 4 of our ignition coils. We're going to wipe them down, drop them right back into the spark plug tubes, and then we're going to finger tight the bolt, and then we'll torque it to spec. All right, so I have the first coil here. Just going to give it a nice wipe down, because remember it did have a bit of oil from those spark plug seals leaking. So just give it a nice little wipe down here. Nothing too crazy, just enough to get all the dirt and grime and oil off of it. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead, drop it on down. All right, and then we're gonna do the same thing for the other 3. All right, so now that we have all 4 ignition coils reinstalled with the 10 mils back finger tight, we're going to go ahead and torque all 4 of these 10 mils to spec. Now the torque spec, if you look here, it's in between 7.2 and 8.7 foot-pounds. So I'm going to go right in the middle at 8 foot-pounds. We're going to convert it to inch-pounds again. So it's going to be 96 inch-pounds. So got the torque wrench locked in, 96 inch-pounds. Let's go ahead and get these locked in. There's one. Oh. Lost the socket. 2, 3, 4. All right, so we got all 4 10 mils now locked in at 96 inch-pounds. All right, now that we have our ignition coils in, torque to spec, we're gonna go ahead and grab our plastic harness rail here. We're just gonna put it right back into the orientation that it belongs in. This thing's looking pretty dusty compared to everything cleaned up now, but I guess it is what it is at this point. But we're gonna finger tight these 10 mils in. All right, so now we got both of these 10 mils dropped back in finger tight. I'm just gonna go ahead and give them just a light turn with the ratchet. Nothing crazy. That should be good. I'm gonna do the same thing with this one. That's good right there. Just give it a nice turn until it stops, and that should be more than enough to hold that in place. All right, so now that we have the rail back installed with the 2 10 mils, we're going to go ahead and get our ignition coil harnesses plugged back up. So you literally just pop it in, and then you press the gray tab down. All right, so slide it on, press the tab down. Nothing crazy at all. We're just taking them, putting them right back on, and pressing the clip right back in. So all of the ignition coils are actually fully reinstalled, torque, and everything's back together just like it was when we took it apart. All right, we're almost wrapped up here. Now we do have to get our harness wire here back over the valve cover, so you need to sneak this back under that power steering line right there. Okay, so we're sneaking that back under. Now I did end up cutting these plastic retaining zip ties right here off because they weren't in the best condition. They did break down a little bit, and like I said, they do break from heat and, you know, just constant hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold throughout the years and miles. So we're gonna go ahead, take some zip ties and get these zip tied in right back where it was. All right, now if you look at this wire, you can kind of see where it's a little mark where the old zip ties were. You know, they align pretty good. So what I'm gonna do is just go ahead and take our zip tie here, slide it right in. All right, it's nothing crazy. Zip ties fix everything. All right, got that one locked on. Now we're going to do the same thing for the rear. You can see the spot right where it's supposed to be on the wire. I'm going to lock this in the same orientation. There we go, guys. Got both of those zip tied in. Go ahead and cut these nice evenly and clean. Bang. All right, so we got both of those zip tied in, and they look pretty stock, I mean, considering. So they're right back in their correct orientation. Make sure you got the wire going above the PCV hose. But there we go, guys. Everything is reinstalled. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and start the car up. We're going to let it run. So I want to make sure we have no leaks. And then really the last step is just putting the plastic cover right back on the engine. So we're going to start it up, let it run for a bit, make sure nothing's spewing, no leaks on the internal or the external part of this valve cover gasket. So we just got to reconnect our negative battery terminal and we'll get this thing started up. All right, guys, the car is running. Disregard the whine. I think it's got an AC compressor whine like a lot of these 2.0s get, but that's a whole other project. But as far as our valve cover gasket, he's been running and I don't see any seepage. Not any on the inside. It's looking pretty dry. Alright, so I think we're pretty much good, guys, as far as this leak. I think our valve cover gasket and spark plug seal solved it. We got everything nice and cleaned up, reinstalled, and there we go, guys. That is a full install on the valve cover gasket on this 2.0 Kia Forte. So the only thing left now is to go ahead and throw the engine cover back on. Now this should just snap right back into place. There we go. Not always easy one-handed, but there we go, guys. Cover back on, and we are done. So I hope this helped with doing the valve cover gasket on your first gen Kia Forte. Make sure you stay tuned because you never know when I might be wrenching on this thing again. And until next time, guys.